And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to continue talking about the concept of elasticity. And we're going to continue to look at the concept of elasticity by looking at another example. So over here we have on the vertical axis, we have the price of some good. On the horizontal axis, we have the quantity of some good. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure the elasticity of the curve going in this direction and then coming back in this direction. And we're going to see that that is going to create a problem. So theoretically, the elasticity on this part of the curve should always be the same number. But we're going to find out that that's not always the case, and it's going to create a problem for us. And then we're going to develop a solution to that problem. So let's just get into it, and you'll see what I'm talking about as we do this. So let's measure elasticity starting at price equals $4. So that's going to be right here. Price equals $4. And when the price is equal to $4, the quantity is equal to 5. So we're going to measure elasticity as we go from this point, price equals $4, up to this point where the price is $5. So let's measure that elasticity. So, all right, we got to write out our elasticity formula. So there's our symbol, elasticity. And the elasticity is equal to the, we did this on a previous video, it's equal to the change in quantity over quantity divided by the change in price over the starting price. And so then we go ahead and we plug in our numbers. So the change in quantity as we go from here to here, the change in the quantity, and let's just label this. I'm gonna call this point A. So we're starting here at price equals 4, which is a point A. So we're starting here. And when we move from here to here, when the price goes from $4 to $5, the quantity is going to change by 1. So I'm going to record that here. The change in the quantity was 1. Divided by the starting quantity, when we started at this point A, the starting quantity was 5. So it's 1 divided by 5 in the numerator, and then our denominator is the change in price over price. So the price went up from $4 to $5, so the change in price was 1, and the starting price of point A, the starting price was 4. And now it becomes a calculator exercise. You go ahead and you plug the numbers into your calculator, and you should get an elasticity equal to 0.8, or we'll say 0.8 over 1. And remember, I always like to say 0.8 over 1. So what does that mean? That means here when the price goes up from $4 to $5, we got a denominator is the change in the price. So we got a 1% increase in price caused a 0.8%, that's the quantity in the numerator, a 0.8% decrease in quantity. Okay, so that was our interpretation of what this answer means. So we got to calculate the answer and then write out the interpretation. Now, let's go the opposite way. Let's say, so I'm going to switch this and say we're going to start at the price equals 5. Starting at the price equals 5, that's going to be starting at this point right here. So I'm going to call that point B. So it's going to be point B. And now we're starting at the price is equal to 5. And we're going to lower the price. We're going to decrease the price from $5 to $4. And we're going to watch what happens. So we're going to do our elasticity calculation again. So here's my elasticity is equal to, and then my formula, change in quantity over quantity divided by the change in price over the price. So my change in quantity, okay, when the price is going to go from 4 to 5, and when that happens, the quantity is going to go from, did I just say that backwards? Let me say that again. Price is going to go from 5 to 4. We're going to cut the price from $5 to $4, and when we do, the quantity is going to go up from 4 units to 5 units. Consumers are going to increase their consumption by 1. So my change in quantity is 1, and my starting quantity at point B is 4. My starting quantity is 4. So I got 1 divided by 4. All divided by, okay, now let's do the price, the change in the price. The price goes from $5 down to $4. So the price decreased by 1. Remember, we ignore the negatives. And let's see, the price, the original price was 5. It went from 5 to 4, so the starting price was 5. And then we go ahead and we punch that into our calculator, and we get an elasticity of 1.25 over 1. And then what's the interpretation? What does that mean? Well, this is our 1% change in price. A 1% decrease, in this case, we decrease the price. So 1% decrease in price caused a numerator is the change in the quantity. So it caused a 1.25% increase in the quantity. A 1% decrease in the price caused a 1.25% increase in the quantity. So that's our interpretation. Now, here's the problem with all of this. The problem with all of this is that the elasticity, when we went from this point, between these 2 points, point A and point B, the elasticity in between these 2 points, theoretically, when we calculate it, it should always be the same number because we're in between those 2 points. But we can see that we got 2 different answers. Okay, we calculated when we started at point 4, the elasticity, and we went this way. Then the elasticity was 0.8. But when we calculated the elasticity starting at point B, when the price was 5, then we got a different elasticity. Then we got an elasticity calculation of 1.25. So we're getting different numbers for the same part of the curve. And the problem here is the starting points. That's what's causing the problem, is the starting points. So let's say if we can fix this problem, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use what is called midpoint elasticity. We're going to use what's called midpoint elasticity. And what this does is it gets rid of the whole concept of a starting point. So here's how we're going to do this. So midpoint elasticity. So I'm going to say elasticity midpoint. An elasticity midpoint has roughly the same formula with one change. 2 changes, really. It's going to be the change in quantity over the midpoint quantity, all divided by the change in the price over the midpoint price. Okay, so instead of changing quantity over starting quantity, it's going to be changing quantity over the midpoint quantity. Change in price over the starting price. Instead, it's going to be change in price over the midpoint price. So let's see what that means if we calculate the elasticity right here. Now, it doesn't matter whether you start at point A or whether you start at point B. It's irrelevant. You're going to get the same answer every time. Okay, the change in quantity between these 2 points is 1. So the change in quantity is 1. The midpoint quantity between these 2 points is going to be the midpoint between 4 and 5, which is the same thing, by the way. Don't let this be confusing. It's the same thing as doing the average. So the midpoint is the same as taking the average. So to find this midpoint, you would take the average of these 2 numbers. You would do 4 plus 5 divided by 2 is going to give you a midpoint or average of 4.5. Okay, so the midpoint quantity is 4.5. The midpoint quantity is 4.5. See, so I've eliminated the problem of whether my starting quantity is 5 or 4. That's not a problem anymore. Doesn't matter where you started. Okay, the elasticity between these 2 points has a midpoint quantity of 4.5. Now, let's look at it from the price side. The change in price in between these 2 points, the price changed by 1. And the midpoint price is going to be the midpoint between these 2, which is going to be the average of these 2 numbers, which is going to be 5 plus 4 divided by 2. Same thing, 5 plus 4. Sorry, that's hard to read here. Let me back that up. Let me get rid of that. And let's just bring that down here. So that midpoint is 5 plus 4 divided by 2. That's the average or midpoint between those 2 prices. And it's the same number, is going to be 4.5. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to record the midpoint price is 4.5. And then 1 divided by 4.5, all divided by 1 over 4.5 is simply equal to 1, which remember we want to write as 1 over 1. So the elasticity is equal to 1 when we use the midpoint formula. And that's the formula that I'm going to use most of the time because it's going to give us a more accurate number. Now, let's say what this means. Let's interpret this. That means a 1% change in the price. So we don't have direction because I don't know if I started at A, it started at B, it doesn't matter. A 1% change in the price caused a 1% change in the quantity. A 1% change in the price caused a 1% change in the quantity moving along here. So really this elasticity right here using midpoint elasticity is equal to 1. All right, finally, let's finish this up. General rules. What are our general rules that we can say about all of this? General rules are this. Whenever the elasticity is less than 1, then we call that inelastic. That is called inelastic. So in our first attempt to calculate this, we got an inelastic number. When the elasticity is greater than 1, then we describe it as elastic. We use the word elastic to describe that situation. That was right here. It was greater than 1. It was 1.25. And then finally, if the elasticity is equal to 1, that's what we saw right here. If it's equal to 1, then we call it unit. That is called unit elastic. Unit elastic is what it's called when the elasticity is equal to 1. So we're going to see that these concepts are a really big deal: inelastic, elastic, and unit elastic. But I'm out of time on this video, so we will talk more about inelastic, elastic, and unit elastic on an upcoming video. All right, this has been Mr. Hagen again, another Econ podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.